Much
For the
better.
computer.
Yes.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. So Avishai, was the volume good?
Yes, I think so.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I'm not sure. Maybe you have to work up to it. Your voice seemed tentative. Be your full, powerful self.
I will do that. Thank you. I wouldn't want to let you down, Pinkel.
Like you did in the boat. In the boat.
In the boat, exactly.
And Jonathan, I feel like we're in Sesame Street singing one of these things is not like the others. Any chance you could put on a white shirt? No problem if you can't.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Great.
Come right back.
Well, not this instant.
We only have a couple minutes, everybody.
Josh, a couple of questions. A question for you.
Okay.
Do you want to, you're the host, do you want to be informed through the chat box if there's any technical difficulties? Otherwise, we will try to refrain from chatting.
Yeah, that works fine.
Okay, great.
Avishai, do you have any more light in your room?
Yes, one more. I can.
Oh. So it's
Is that
6:50.
any better?
Yes,
No.
No,
That's no, I think that's nice.
You think
it's
it's okay?
warmer.
It looks a lot warmer. It looks good.
Okay. I just didn't want the light to be in his face. So, I mean, like.
Just a second.
It was good before.
Okay.
That's
Is that
good.
okay? Or, I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's very nice.
yeah, closer. That's good. Come closer.
closer. Listen. Closer.
Perfect. Perfect.
So I expected Dulcie to be logged in as a participant panelist, and I never did hear back from Irene Ortzila.
I know Charles Butter is logged in as a participant, as an attendee,
Okay.
so probably
Okay.
they're there.
Great.
Phil's volume seems extremely loud.
Ah,
It does?
so Phil, yeah. Let me see, how does this
Well,
work?
this is without. I could try it with the earbuds, but I think it made it louder last time.
Turn down your volume a little, Phil.
Like that. Okay.
Oh, good.
I'm kind of cramped up
Volume is fine to me.
so I can be big heads like the rest of you.
Tina, did you want the music?
Hi, is that any? Can you hear me now?
So Phil, are you doing that in your laptop settings or in your Zoom settings?
That's
But you
right.
can set it so
Oh,
everybody-
Just plugged in
Irene's
my
here.
earphone, my earbuds.
That's better.
Yeah,
Something's wrong with your.
now-
Is
but now-
that's better? That's better like this or like this?
Something's
Is
going.
it better like this?
I think it was interrupted once you moved to the other settings. So I think it's better if you stay the way it was initially. Just maybe you should speak a little less, like maybe try to be a little more quiet, if that's possible.
I'm used to usually yelling, so it'll be hard for me, but I'll try.
I thought it was fine.
If
Yeah,
I-
that's-
I
that's-
think you-
it
Okay,
was-
so I'll go without the earbuds.
yes,
It's perfect the way you're talking right now.
yeah,
Okay.
it's fine. It's
Okay, thanks.
absolutely fine.
Okay.
So I just saw Charles Butter's name on the screen.
Yeah, as an attendee.
No. Showed up on this gallery view.
I did that because he raised his hand. Should he be in here?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, the other thing people might do, if there's time real quick, make sure you have all your other devices off so it doesn't interfere with your internet. 'Cause Jonathan, when you were starting, there was some chat, there was some jitter. So I don't know if there's other things in the house you can turn off which are connected to your internet or anything.
Okay, I'll check.
Sorry, Phil. I think Steve is putting in his 2 cents right here. He says that you sound a lot louder than everybody else. Maybe
Okay.
you're close to your microphone.
I don't really want to mess with my audio settings. I'll just talk quieter.
Phil,
You can just change it lower, like lower at the keyboard.
can I help Phil for just 1 second? Phil, are you on a desktop right now?
Yes.
Yes. If you go where it says zoom.us, You go to preferences. And there's a,
Zoom cloud meetings?
mm, it should say, you should have like, are you on a Mac or a PC?
PC.
It's probably, there is a settings option.
Okay.
Sure, and mine says general video audio. I can control how loud my audio is there within the audio. Do you see that?
Irene, are you coming on?
Audio settings.
So
I'll turn the microphone volume down a bit. Let's try that.
There you go.
Okay. Or automatically adjust volume. Shall I leave it?
That's actually what you want it to do.
great.
Okay.
And Josh, can you walk Irene through enabling her video?
Let's see if I just asked her to start it. She should have gotten a. There we
Oh,
go.
there they are.
Here they are.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is that any better?
Yes.
It's a little better.
Okay.
Yeah. Irene and Charlie, you should also unmute yourself, I think. Yes or no?
No, they don't have a speaking.
They don't have Irene doesn't have a speaking part.
Okay.
Hi, Irene. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Irene.
Hi, Charlie.
Wonderful
To see you all. I miss you a lot.
Great to see you both.
Good to see you.
We should know we're already broadcasting. Everybody can see.
Yeah.
Oh, we
I'm
are?
getting texts from
I'm
my
sorry.
beloved saying they see me. So
Intervene
yeah.
on your
Oh, how marvelous.
broadcast.
So
A little bit of the sausage being made. It's okay.
Okay.
I think
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
This is us.
Baruch haba.
I don't know.
Ruchim habayim.
Yes. Oh, Elizabeth, you're here. Is that you? I see.
So we can greet people.
It was so easy getting into compared
Hi,
to
Mario.
these small.
Hi, Annette. Hi, Kettle. Hi, Diane. Hi, Lisa.
Pull your chair towards me.
Josh, can you mute, and Charlie? This?
I just did it.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Paula.
Ah,
For our attendees, we'll start in just one moment. For our attendees who are here watching, you can send all of the panelists. You can send all of us messages. Although I would only encourage that if it's absolutely necessary, just so that it doesn't distract the members of Generations After. And certainly at the end, if people would like to send those messages, I'm sure that would be greatly appreciated. But if you're having a problem,
We'll lower the bandwidth because Bingo was saying it was a little wobbly.
Okay.
Steve, you got to get off of this
Why?
because he's on it as a panelist.
no, he shouldn't be.
Maybe use Ben's phone. Ben, hold on. Use Ben's computer.
it's okay. Hold on, let me see if I can.
Yeah,
Erase him, Josh.
just demote him to attendee. He'll understand.
He's done.
There we go.
Oh, the power, the power.
A little taste of Zoom bombing.
So what was I gonna say? I totally lost my train of thought. But we should have a sort of break and then begin our service, I believe. Yes. So maybe a moment of some reflection, quiet reflection. Thank you, Alon and Fernando. This Shabbat, we will read a double portion from Leviticus, Tazria Metzora, a notoriously difficult section of Torah as it discusses in great detail skin ailments, diagnosing those ailments, and how to mitigate them within the community. It involves quarantine outside the community, with the priest checking in on the Metzora, the person with the skin ailment, once a week. It is a section of Torah that is forever changed for me, and likely for us all. At the core of the portion, and in fact at the center of Leviticus itself, is the movement from sacred to mundane, ritual purity to ritual impurity, a state of being inside the fold or outside the fold. But in truth, it is constant movement from inside to outside, outside to inside, a process rather than a decree. So here we sit in our own homes, at our computer screens, quarantined from each other. We sit outside together, members of a world community sitting apart and separated. We are all the Metzorah for now. And tonight, we bring into focus a moment in our history that for some is always present, and for others, the Metzorah of memory, the remembrance of the Shoah, one of the darkest periods for our people, relegated to infrequent reflection. But with our reflection, we redeem the Metzorah. With our reflection here on Yom HaShoah, we become the priests bringing the estranged back into the community. No, we cannot bring back our families, but we can make sure they are not lost to the world. We cannot bring back 6 million, but we can make sure they are not forgotten and left behind as the world moves on to another place and another time. It is one of my great honors as the rabbi of Temple Beth Emeth to welcome generations after this amazing group of our members to our Bima, virtual or otherwise. The stories you tell, the way you honor your parents and loved ones, honor the entire Jewish people. You are a blessing to your families and a blessing to all of us. It is my honor to invite onto our virtual Bima, Julie Ellis.
Good evening. We welcome you tonight as we observe Yom HaShoah v'Hagavurah during extraordinary times. We of the generations after, the descendants of victims of the Shoah, are here tonight because we are compelled to speak by whatever means we can. It is our honor and our obligation to speak for our ancestors. We are bound together by our common history and by our continuing journeys. Tonight, we are all bound together, even though we must be alone in our homes. We may not remember what day of the week it is, that today is Monday, but we do know that this is an important year in many ways. It is a year that will go down in history. This year also marks 75 years since the liberation of the concentration camps, 75 years since the end of World War II. So many of our loved ones were lost in the Shoah that we have difficulty grasping its full horror. 6 million Jews, as well as millions of others, were deemed unfit for life itself. Their deaths haunt us to this day. They must never be forgotten. We are forever grateful to our parents who suffered and lost so much, but who somehow were able to continue living to give us life. 75 years is not just a momentous number. It is the horizon of living memory. But will the people of the world remember? We always say, never forget, never again. Yet as we reach this milestone year, new waves of hate continue to emerge. Do we have the courage to stop the rise of anti-Semitism once again? Do we have the strength to fight discrimination and genocides that continue all over the world? Today, we are also fighting COVID-19. We cannot compare what our parents went through 75 years ago to what we are going through today. But we can and we should draw upon our parents' stories for inspiration. Their courage gives us strength and determination. Their resilience and dignity in the face of destruction empower us to move forward today. We will get through this and many other challenges to come. Zachor, remember, always remember that from the ashes, a remnant of our people emerged and created new lives. And now, Hinenu, here we are.
I'm being told to do the whole thing all over again. Okay. Ner Zikaron, lighting the memorial lights. It is estimated that in addition to the 6 million Jewish victims of the Shoah, another 6 to 11 million souls perished at the hands of the Nazis. Tonight, we all light a yahrzeit candle in our homes. This multitude of candles honors the millions whom the Nazis deemed unworthy of life and therefore targeted for extermination. If you have a candle, please light it now. We read together. We kindle these lights in memory of the 6 million Jews and unknown millions of others murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators. May the memory of the righteous be for a blessing. Zichanam livracha.
This poem was written by Ilona Carmel, beloved aunt of Joy Wolf Enzer. Anniversaries. In my house, no morning candles will ever glisten. Too many would have to burn, millions. Then days of anniversaries would follow, too many to honor the lost ones. It would take forever. In my house, no morning candles will ever glisten. I tell you, there's not even enough time to light them. My whole life is already a prolonged day of mourning. Each minute is spent in grief. What would I do with little teardrop candles when my heart is like a furnace that burned up my happiness with the others? There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember.
יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק כאשר הם עצמם עבדו ואינם. יש אנשים שזיו זכרם מאיר, כאשר הם עצמם אינם עוד בתוכנו. אורות אלה המבהיקים בחשכת הליל, הם שמראים לאדם את הדרך, את הדרך.
Stories of liberation. Today we are free. While physically isolated in our homes, most of us are safe and healthy. We remember where our parents were 75 years ago. In April 1945, Russian bombs began hitting Stutthof, mistaking it for a military camp. The Nazis began the evacuation, marching my mother, Alice Ben, and other inmates to a shipping port and crowding them onto the lower deck of a ship as they pushed out to sea. From the ship, the Germans began shooting at the British liberators who were on land. The inmates on the boat started to scramble amidst the gunfire. My mother told me she made a decision to jump off the boat, even though she didn't know how to swim. Somehow, she made her way to the shore, wading through what she vividly recalled were waters red with blood.
My mother, Magda Kahan-Wilensky, after surviving several camps, was at Bergen-Belsen. At the end of the war, there was so much havoc going on in the camp that she and a friend fled to the woods. Unfortunately, a German boy discovered them. He called on the guards who dragged the two women back to the camp for execution. While they were waiting, the British Army liberated the camp, and my mother was freed.
These are the words of my father, Leszek Wolf. When liberation arrived, the commandant of Langenbilau and all the Germans guarding us called the last appel. They went through all the routine practices of counting us until at one point, the commandant pointed at one of the prisoners and called him over. As he did, the commandant took out of his pants pocket a penknife and handed it to the young fellow. He ordered him to cut off his military insignias from his uniform. At this point, the commandant declared clearly and loudly, and I still remember verbatim his command, als freie Menschen abtreten, as free men dismissed. He signaled his people. They all retreated and started boarding cars and buses. A few hundred young men standing at Appel were slightly confused. And then, as if by command, they all started singing their respective national anthems, Polish, Russian, Czech, Ukrainian, French. This was our liberation.
What did it mean for our parents to be free? On April 15th, 1945, Liberation Day for Bergen-Belsen, my mother, Franka Weintraub-Iglevich, said, "We couldn't believe we were free. Before liberation, we would say that the sun would shine brighter when we were free. We would be so happy." After we were liberated, my friend Fricka asked my sisters and me if we were happy now. "No," we replied. "We did not find our loved ones. We lost our beloved mother and sister." We read together.
There is no grief like the grief that does not speak.
Yes. Yeah. I'm starting again. Apples and oranges. As I'm sitting here, home, quarantined due to the coronavirus epidemic, I cannot help comparing my situation to the one my parents and their parents experienced during the Holocaust. Apples and oranges, I say. Let me explain. The expression like apples and oranges is a bit funny to me coming from Israel. Apple in Hebrew is tapuach, orange in Hebrew is tapuach zahav, or for short, tapuz, meaning a golden apple. Not a striking difference semantically, but they are very two different fruits. Apples are known as the quintessential American fruit with many varieties readily available. Oranges are the quintessential Israeli fruit, known to all older Americans as Jaffa oranges, named for the region where I was born. As a child, on my way to school, I picked fresh, delicious, sweet oranges from the orchard near my parents' home, unaware what they had suffered 20 years earlier. Apples and oranges. There are many differences between the then and now. To paraphrase the question, "Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mileilotehem?" How were their nights different from our nights? The Holocaust was a man-made disaster driven by hate, anti-Semitism, and the desire to eliminate those who were undesirable to the Aryan ideal race. We Jews were deemed the most unacceptable and still are by some. The coronavirus is natural in its origin and not yet well understood. It spares no population. It is, however, more deadly to some communities. Sadly, our national leaders did not react quickly to the information that they were hearing and did not prepare our nation properly. Though it was not a willful cruelty, it was ignorant and arrogant neglect. What is the difference between our parents' lives in the Holocaust and our lives now? During the Holocaust, victims were crowded into trains with no room to move and hardly any air to breathe, only to be brought to the concentration camp. And then to be taken into their death by the car trains. The coronavirus is of natural origin. Today, we are isolated and separated to help prevent the spread of the disease and its deadly outcome. Then they hardly had any food or sanitation. Now, so far, many of us have plenty of food, water, and good sanitation. During the Holocaust years, one needed to have the good fortune to survive, whether it was a stranger willing to risk their life to help them, or the opportunity became available, one took a chance to escape or hide. However, if caught, the chance for survival was close to zero. Now, for most part, we are safe in our own homes. Even if one contracts the virus, chances of survival are high. So I say, like apples and oranges, can we even start imagining what our loved ones went through for as much as 3 to 5 years, when the most they could have imagined in the end was death? I would like to close with another quote from Passover Seder. Hashata avdei l'shana haba bnei chorim. This year we are slaves. Next year may we all be free. Now we're here, slaves to our own fears, wishing to return to a sense of normalcy. Next year may we be healthy and free, physically, mentally, and politically.
We read together. For the dead and the living, we must bear witness.
Choices. My father's survival was not all pure luck, although he did have a healthy dose of that. While human beings, Nazis and their collaborators, cruelly plotted against and murdered 6 million Jews, my father mainly survived because other human beings made different choices. Some of these choices were small: an extra piece of bread, a kind word, a gesture of friendship. Other choices were more extreme and made an enormous impact. My father's brother Isaac was an officer in the Polish army and was severely injured at the front. When he returned to the ghetto, he was given permission to leave the ghetto to visit the Red Cross and receive medical aid. Isaac, or Izzy as he was called, was 17 years older than my father, and he had been a partner with my grandfather in their lumber business, so he had contacts outside. He was able to smuggle food back to the ghetto, keeping the family from starvation. And when it became clear that the ghetto was going to be dissolved, reducing the population from 20,000 to 2,000 Jews, and that only those with work permits would be allowed to stay, Izzy was able to obtain 20 precious work permits from friends who owned a barrel factory. A funny thing though, humans and their choices. My uncle asked his friends, they were his friends before the war, to help him in getting the work permits. They agreed to help, but they had conditions. They wanted payment for the permits. Luckily, my uncle was able to pay the money, but it left a bitter taste. Friends? No. Based on their choices, he realized that they had never truly been his friends. And yet these people did make the choice to offer the permits. So Izzy, my father, and my grandfather avoided deportation to the killing center of Treblinka. We are certainly not living in the Holocaust today, but here's the lesson for me. I'm always striving to choose kindness and service, because even the smallest gestures can make a big difference in a person's life. This was certainly true for my father and my Uncle Izzy.
We read together. Survival is a privilege which entails obligations. I am forever asking myself, what can I do for those who have not survived?
More stories of liberation. Today we are free. While physically isolated in our homes, most of us are safe and healthy. We remember where our parents were 75 years ago.
My mother, Juliana Gardos, told me the story that after she was liberated, She and a girlfriend were walking down the main street of the little town, and a tall black American soldier came toward them with a huge butcher's knife pulled out from his pocket. The two of them were incredibly scared, having never seen such a large man, nor an African American. He walked up to them smiling, cut the yellow star off their shirts with the big knife, and gave them chocolates and cigarettes.
In 1945, after a forced march out of Auschwitz, my mother, Magda Goldstein, and her companions survived 2 other horrific camps, endured bombings, and were forced to spend time sleeping in open fields. One morning, they realized their Nazi guards had disappeared during the night. The women eventually made their way on a Red Cross bus to Prague. Meanwhile, after surviving horrendous conditions as a slave laborer in Russia, my father, Louis Goldstein, managed to join up with the Czech Legion and fought his way back to Prague. He had been maintaining a vigil on the streets there, hoping to find my mother. It was the first week in May 1945 when, as my mother said, the ultimate miracle happened. After being separated for 3 years, they found each other at a refugee center in Prague.
Each time I visit the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., I stand transfixed, watching the footage documenting Dachau's liberation. I keep looking over and over again for the image that resembles my father, Philip Ben. On April 29, 1945, age 27, diseased with typhus and weighing 75 pounds, he was liberated from Dachau by the Americans. Just a few years ago, I was amazed to discover that my daughter-in-law's grandfather, Art Dugan, was a young soldier with the American troops that freed my father. Art described the unit's approach to Dachau. On our way to Dachau, there was a terrible stench. I couldn't believe what we saw when we arrived. Dead bodies lying everywhere. You stepped over the corpses like they were roadkill. And those alive, I won't ever forget what they looked like. I don't care what the Germans say. The townspeople definitely knew what was going on inside the camp. With that smell, there was no way not to know.
We read together. Above all, the prophets remind us of the moral state of a people. Few are guilty, but all are responsible.
Protest is an act of faith. The world has never been a perfect place, but our people have always persisted in building vibrant communities and culture, even when everything was shattered. The pogroms and turmoil of the previous generation sent my elder Tante Libby to America in 1917, where she married and became the owner of a small dress shop in Detroit. However, she worried about her twin sister, who was still living in a remote shtetl of Ludwipol, Poland, in a home which looked across the Jewish marketplace to where my father grew up. Years later, when the news of increasing brutality in Poland filtered back from Europe to Detroit, Tante Libby and others raised funds throughout the war for food and blankets to help her family and Jews in need. That home of my father, Chaim Reutbeard, and his sister Chana and their 2 younger brothers was a warm, cozy place centered around a stone hearth. My father talked about the cow they kept underneath the house and the horse for milk and the horse that pulled his father's wagon. The local Jewish community celebrated in 2 synagogues and a Zionist cultural school. My father was a member of the left-wing Zionist movement. He and his friends hiked in the birch forest, skated on the river in the winter, and fought with the Ukrainian and Polish gangs. Not a perfect life, but a good life. In June 1941, the SS followed the Nazi blitzkrieg into Poland within a few days and reached Liverpool. It was the end of the community. Chaim and his older sister, Chana, were old enough to run, but their loving mother, Lana, father, two younger brothers, cousins, teachers, friends, everyone was enslaved, and by the following June, murdered by machine gun in a ditch across the river. My siblings and I know only the vaguest scraps of those bad years. My father's time in Ukraine, Russia, Stalinist labor camps, and lastly in an Italian refugee camp. My father and Chana and a few cousins survived, and in 1948, with spouses and infants, 11 of them crowded into my Tante Livy's little house in Detroit. There was so much abundance and celebration, a chance to rebuild. My father found a pathway to his American culture through his marriage to my mother, Miriam, Mickey, and he could not really overcome the shadow of fog of the wartime years. Today, my father's gone. I'm a grandfather of two young, lovely granddaughters. In Europe, the terror exhausted itself, burnt after World War II. We Jews, the kindling, were perhaps too scarce now for the flames to keep roaring. But now, the threat of anti-Semitism and xenophobia is rising, and our American democracy is fragile. It's a scary time. With hope and luck, we'll come through okay, both individual and small acts of tzedakah and kindness, and the rising of protest as community will be enough to stand up. We hope that they will be enough to stand up to the power of chaos and hate. I live in a prayer for our Jewish and American struggle for justice.
We read together.
So let us be
Let
alert.
us be alert. Alert in a twofold sense. Since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of. And since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake.
Best intentions. On January 26th, I received a message from a high school classmate. I knew Peter in passing. We'd had a few classes together. He recalled that long ago, during a class discussion, I'd mentioned that my mother, Lola Goldstein, was a Holocaust survivor. I had no memory of this, as I rarely spoke of my mother's experiences in those days. Peter wanted my permission to reference my mother in a Facebook post about a 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. While this might seem like a perfectly respectful gesture from the outside, I felt a pang of discomfort, and I hesitantly wrote back to him. Peter, although January 26th is the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, my mother was not that lucky. In anticipation of the Russians advancing towards Auschwitz, the Germans sent 10,000 prisoners on a death march out of the camp, just days before the liberation. Of that group, only 500 ultimately survived, my mother amongst them. In the dead of winter, they were marched to other camps under beastly conditions, working in munitions factories and enduring bombings. My mother was ultimately liberated in May at the end of World War II, many horrible months later than today's anniversary. So there lies my ambivalence. While January 27th is a significant date in history, it wasn't one of great joy for my mother, nor others in my family. It's a bittersweet missed opportunity, fraught with near-death experiences. In that context, I do applaud any recognition for the suffering of millions and the exposure of all heinous acts that took place. Nonetheless, thank you for remembering my mother, Lola Taubman. Only 30 years after the war, I was in high school with my classmate Peter, learning the textbook version of the Holocaust. It was just another chapter in my history book, unrecognizable from what I had gleaned growing up with my survivor mother. How could the historians get it so wrong? The very people who had lived through the Holocaust were very much alive. They just needed to be asked to recount how it really happened. In the 1980s, a few years after my confusing high school experience, the first gathering of Holocaust survivors began to take place. Finally, their stories began to be captured in their own words. Today, a very different curriculum of the Holocaust is widely taught in schools, but most of those who survived those experiences are now gone, relying on us to speak to the testament of that horror.
We read together. Who will remember the rememberers?
Hinenu. Last month, feels like last year, a news story leapt off the screen at me about the 77th anniversary of the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto, which occurred on March 13th, 1943. The article featured a heart-stopping photograph of an endless line of people carrying their bundles as they marched down the street, guarded by Nazi officers. I enlarged the view until the image blurred, searching in vain for a glimpse of my parents, Henya and Leszek, my aunt Ila, my grandmother Mita, and countless other members of our once huge family. I didn't see them, but they were there, marching from the wartime ghetto to the Płaszów camp that was still being built on the grounds of a Jewish cemetery in the very next neighborhood. My mother often told the story of that day. It was an unseasonably warm March afternoon, and my father, who never did like the heat, took off his jacket, on which the yellow Star of David was sewn. The infamous commandant of the Płaszów camp, Amon Gut, put a gun to his head and screamed, "Jew, where's your star?" My 21-year-old mother grabbed Gut's wrist and yelled, "Don't you dare hurt my husband." Gut had a habit of killing people for sport, but in that moment, for some unknown reason, he laughed and walked away. My mother's impetuous act of love, courage, and defiance saved my father's life, so that 77 years later, I can sit here in the safety of my home and tell this story to you. My parents often reflected that beneath their chaos and fear was a rock solid core. Gam ze ya'avor, this too shall pass. One day the world will be the world again. We have to remember how to behave. Hinenu, here we are. There's plenty of turmoil and anxiety surrounding us now. We don't know what the death toll will be from this devastating virus. We will feel the ripple effects of this trauma for many years to come. But let us remember, we have a rock solid core. Gam ze ya'avor, the world will be the world again. Hinenu.
We read together. If we bear all this suffering, and if there are still Jews left, when it is over, then Jews, instead of being doomed, will be held up as an example.
El male rachamim, shochen bamramim, hamitzev menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמות 6,000,000 אחינו ואחיותינו שהרגו על קידוש השם בעל הרחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום, בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר fully compassionate God on high, to our 6 million brothers and sisters murdered because they were Jews, grant clear and certain rest with you in the lofty heights of the sacred and the pure, whose brightness shines like the very glow of heaven. Source of mercy, forever enfold them in the embrace of your wings, secure their souls in eternity. Adonai, they are yours. They will rest in peace. Amen. rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the
Okay, we'll wait for the rabbi to unmute himself and start this prayer again, please.
Thank you very much. Kaddish Yom HaShoah, the Shoah Kaddish. Yitgadal,
Auschwitz,
V'yitkadash,
Birkenau,
Shemei Rabbah,
Honar,
Be'alma Divra Chirutei,
Łódź,
V'yamlich Malchutei,
Majdanek,
B'chayechon Uv'yomechon,
Janowska,
Uv'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael,
Płaszów,
Ba'agala Uv'izman Kariv,
Skarżysko,
V'imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Ulamei Almaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach,
Theresienstadt,
V'yitpar V'yitromam,
Babi Yar,
V'yitnaseh V'yithadar,
Treblinka,
V'yit'aleh V'yithalal,
Bergen-Belsen,
Shemei Dekudesha Brichu,
Buchenwald,
Le'ela
Warsaw,
Min Kol Birchata V'shirata,
Vilna,
Tush Bechata V'nechemata,
Stutthof,
Da'amiran Be'alma,
Dachau.
V'imru, Amen. Yehe Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Ose Shalom B'romav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Names. Prayer by Julie Ellis. During this service, we remember the victims of the Shoah, those whose names we know, those whose names we yearn to know, those whose stories we know a little bit about, those whose stories we can only imagine. We honor and remember the 6 million who perished, and we honor and remember our loved ones who, through heavenly and human miracles, through personal fortitude, were given the chance to live and to choose to keep faith in God and in life. As written in Deuteronomy, see, I set before you this day life and prosperity, death and adversity. Choose life that you and your descendants may live. Our mothers and fathers strove to keep the memory of their families and of our entire people alive. They chose life so that we might live. They ensured that there would be a next generation, and they blessed us by bestowing upon us the crown of the good names of the family they lost. We and generations after rejoice in the miracle of life renewed, while remembering the lives that came before us, our mothers and fathers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. May God bless them and protect them and grant them peace.
Amen.
We pledge ourselves to keep their memories alive, to keep faith in God, to choose life.
Sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln bleien, verstehen blaue Tag. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebänkte Schau, es wird abheugt und unser Trott mir seinen da. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebänkte Schau, es wird abheugt und unser Trott mir seinen da. Von grünem Palmenland bis weißem Land mit Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Sprotzen wettert unser Gwure, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen sie, so spritzt von unser Blut. Sprotzen wettert unser Gwure, unser Mut. Es wird die Morgensonne begilden uns dem Hain, und der Nächten wird verschwinden mit dem Feind. Nur versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor, wie a Parol so ging das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Nur versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor, wie a Parol so ging das Lied von Dor zu Dor. Sag nicht einmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln Beine verstellen blaue Tag. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebänkte Schau, es wird abheugt und unser Trott mir seinen da. Kommen wird nach unser ausgebänkte Schau, es wird abheugt und unser Trott mir seinen da.
I am grateful, so grateful for all of you. For all of you who are willing to share the stories of your family. For all of you who are willing to reflect on those stories, to make them a part of who you are, to help all of us who maybe didn't have family who experienced the Shoah in the way that your families did. I'm grateful that you can continue to be the living memory of your families, offering their stories to us this year and every year that you have stood in front of our congregation. I'm also aware, though, that when we offer stories, that can be painful, too. As much as it may be therapeutic and clarifying, it can also be painful. And so, with maybe that pain in mind, but also the pain that so many of us are suffering from today, the feeling of loss, even if we have not lost anyone, but the feeling of loss, of being restricted to our homes, the feeling of loss, knowing that there are those who are fighting for their lives, that there are those who are putting their lives at risk to help others who are fighting for their lives. We pray for healing, not just the healing of our bodies, but the healing of our souls, the healing of our spirits, so that when we do come out of our places, that we will be whole, still, and ready to be with each other once again.
renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
On behalf of Generations After, I thank you for attending tonight's service and for joining us in remembering and honoring our family members. L'Shana Haba in person and in good health. Meanwhile, good night and be well.
Thank you.
I had some pan de queso.
Oh, good.
No, that was in that, you know.
There's mac and cheese too.
What? What you?
L'chaim, everybody. Thank you. Good service.
Been waiting all day for this.
Yes. Okay.
L'chaim Labriut.
I gotta go grab mine.
Way to go,
I'll
you
go
guys.
get the bottle.
Just one?
Drink straight from the bottle. That's great.
That's the single serving size.
Troy, you're still the winner for the most serene.
Beautiful.